Thank you everyone who's tuned in for this first of its kind Startup JGU Alumni Lecture Series. Very excited to have Mishaal here. What many of you might not know is that Mishaal is actually the catalyst for entrepreneurship at JGU in a major way. And you'll hear about that and how he did that in his story coming up. So I thought it was incredibly apt to have him as our first JGU alumni to speak through Startup JGU to all of you about the entrepreneurship journey from starting within the university and then moving out and what that's like. So what we're going to do is that we're going to have Mishaal talk. He's going to discuss his story, what he's doing, and then go into his own learnings from his experiences so far. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat box. We will get to the questions at the end of this talk. Just type them right in and I'll make sure that Mishaal hits on any questions that weren't answered. So I think with that, we'll kick it off. We'll have everyone on mute besides myself and Mishaal. And again, if there are any questions, please type it into the chat. So here's to you, Mishaal. Who are you? What are you doing? And how did you end up here?
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thanks guys for tuning in. Excited to do this. And like Renita said, any questions, please feel free to ask them and I'll try getting to them if I don't cover them while I'm speaking. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I don't know if I'm the catalyst for entrepreneurship at Jindal. That was definitely Jeremy. And I'll talk a lot about how JG, my entire journey at JGU and how that was impacted by, of course, the center coming up. But yeah, so currently, just give everyone a quick introduction. So I graduated from JGLS in 2018, did the 5-year program, BA, LLB. So when I graduated from Jindal in 2018, around the same time I had applied for the deferred 2+2 program at HBS at the Harvard Business School, got into that. So the way that works is you have to work for a minimum of 2 years, can defer it by up to another 2 years. So the plan is to go next year. I have deferred it by an additional year. That was pre-COVID, but obviously given the circumstances, turning out to be a good decision. Currently, I work at a startup, a new age Ayurveda startup called Dr. Vaidya's. The company's been around for around 3.5 years, been funded, and has around 100 people working there. So I work in the CEO's office at Dr. Vaidya's. I'll talk a little bit more about that and what that sort of role CEO's office means. But yeah, just to give you an idea of my sort of journey through JGU. So when I came and when I was thinking about, what to speak about over here, I realized that, so when I came into Jindal, in my first year, I was working or trying to work on a startup, which I invested a decent amount of money into from all the internships I did. When that was close to ready, I'd spent a lot of time working on that, trying to put together a team. When that was close to ready, decided to pull the plug, stopped working on it because I decided that, okay, I don't feel necessarily ready to start my own company. And, obviously sometimes I feel like, oh, I'd done all of this, I should just go ahead with it and launch it. But, on the other hand, I feel like, okay, it was the right decision. I don't necessarily think there's ever a right time to launch something. I don't think you're ever ready. You can never be prepared. But, I think at that time, just having entered college, I didn't really have any guidance on it either. So I think from that sense, good decision. That was a company called T-Launcher. I was trying to help artists, so musicians, painters, poets, anyone sort of have a presence online. It was a social networking website where they could even sell their content if they had a premium account. Decided to sort of pull the plug on that. Around the same time, Jeremy set up the Entrepreneurship Center on campus, which actually made a huge difference. For the first time, suddenly I had someone to guide me, had someone to sort of encourage every silly idea I had. So around that time in the second year, we launched something called the Startup Academy. And obviously, so the Startup Academy was a course. It was a semester long course where where the entire aim was to get people to go from idea to sort of execution in one semester. Very ambitious. But, I think we had a lot of fun. We were able to, I hope, definitely help a few students. Definitely helped me. Wherever we were trying to get in guest lecturers. We got a few lawyers to come talk about the legal aspects. There was a lot of peer learning. So I think that was a lot of fun. And that definitely played a role. I actually had no experience with entrepreneurship, didn't really know any entrepreneurs. And I was able to sort of then, actually structure this program with Jeremy where we were able to learn. I was able to learn, like, okay, this is the things that I should have done when I was working on T-Launcher, and this is how I should have gone about it. So I think that benefited me a lot. And, I think I definitely wanted to be an entrepreneur, wasn't sure when I'd be ready. Though, so in the third year, um, what I did was I started something called the Legal Entrepreneurship Cell, and that played again a major role. So the Legal Entrepreneurship Cell in the first year, we were 8 students, and the aim was to do pro bono legal research work with entrepreneurs on campus. So there were a lot of people on campus trying to start companies, of course, and there were a lot of people off campus, a lot of NGOs, a lot of startups trying to who wanted to sort of launch but didn't really have the money, didn't really have the legal expertise, and we were able to help them. And I think, in some sense, that idea actually took off a decent amount. By the second year, we were 35, 40 students. I actually worked with the Times incubator. We were able to connect with the Times incubator. I worked with a couple on their entrepreneurs as well. We worked, of course, with the Tibetan government on the TED program. So we got a lot of great experiences from there. We got a little bit of coverage as well. Barn Bench, Legally India covered us. So I think that was a great experience all in all. Something that I know actually there's still a few students working on at Jindal. So that is great. But yeah, I think over there, what it really helped me with is that, look, you might be in law school, but it really, when you get out and you're trying to work on a company, it's very different from what you're used to and what you've really learned. So I think that really helped me put in perspective how important it is to be prepared, because you're seeing companies. We had a company with $1 million in funding reach out to us. You're seeing companies that are heavily funded, star entrepreneurs, great backgrounds, but they just don't, necessarily cover everything. So, and I face these issues when I launched Plain Crazy as well. You think you've sort of covered everything, and then 6 months in, you're like, oh shit, I basically covered nothing. Um,
It's okay.
but so yeah.
What do you mean by cover everything?
So yeah, so in that sense, so when you start a company, right, there's obviously a million things to think about. So you have your idea, you have your team, you have how am I going to execute my idea, hiring, if it's a service, putting together the whole offering. If it's a product, putting it together, maybe the manufacturing. If it's a tech company, the website, the app, the UI, the UX, the design, the marketing, everything. So those are the things that most people look to cover. And then you have everything ready and you launch, and then suddenly you're like, okay, now what about the accounting? What about the taxes? What about the legal registrations? What about we had, and we learned the hard way. We paid a decent amount of fines in our first few months at Plain Crazy. But there are thresholds. When you cross something, oh, you need to be cutting 10% TDS. When do you cut 10% TDS? When do you cut 2% TDS? If you're an e-commerce company, there's a 1% TCS. So and just in that sense, there's just so much happening all the time, and the things that you do miss out. I highly recommend getting an accountant on board, getting someone to help you with the law stuff. I mean, obviously, maybe not in-house. Even at Plain Crazy now, we've been around since 2017 September, 2.5 years, more than that actually. And we have an accounting firm that we use. We outsource all of that. So I think that's important. I mean, you can't know everything. It's great to, I was like, okay, we learn this on our own, and we did. I did learn a lot. Learned the hard way though. So and at some point you're not going to be able to cover everything. So I think it's good to have specialists on board who will be able to cover all of this. But yeah, the legal entrepreneurship cell, I think, both helping other company, I mean, mainly just trying to help other companies, truly helped me help myself. And I learned a lot from that. Around the same time, I'm sure most people know Arman Sood. He's the co-founder of Sleepy Owl. And he actually had the first startup on campus, I think. He and Ashrajit had started something called eShack, where you could buy sort of goods for your parties, so like beer pong tables, you could buy like the cups. So they started that, I think even before I joined Jindal, so before 2013. Didn't really take off, but obviously they had a great experience from it, learned a lot, and now they're doing extremely well with CPL. But so Arman and I started writing articles under the sort of name Lawpreneur, and we actually wrote a couple of articles, few of which were trending on LinkedIn as well, about how lawyers or how entrepreneurs can learn from previous startups. So we had this series called When Entrepreneurs Got Lawyered. And it was basically, when big startups in India went through difficult legal problems, why they went through it and what you can learn. Um, so just I started, trying to write more, get more into this. In my fourth year, when I went for a semester abroad, I started something called Startup Here Today with a friend, not from Jindal, but another friend from Delhi. And basically what we did again there was we started writing a lot, putting out content on startups. By then I'd written a couple of articles on Your Story. And we also started a podcast. I only did 2 episodes. And then, didn't really follow through with it, which wasn't great. But again, it's a great way, writing, we did a few interviews of entrepreneurs, doing podcasts. It's a great way to reach out to entrepreneurs. You don't know what connections you may make. Obviously most entrepreneurs I've interacted with, VCs, investors, everyone's really willing to help. It's a very tightly knit community. And it's a great way to reach out to people, say, I'd love to learn more from you, I'd love to write about you, I'd love to sort of do a podcast with you. And everyone's always happy to sort of get that coverage as well. So definitely I think that's a great way to go about networking or making connections. So I did that in my fourth year. When I came back to Jindal, we sort of rebranded the startup academy into the Startup Here Today discussion group. And we were meeting once a week to discuss anything anyone wanted to discuss with regards to entrepreneurship. So it wasn't really a formal program. It was like, come if you want, when you can, come and leave. And we're going to talk about entrepreneurship concepts. We're going to talk about other companies. We're going to talk about our own companies. We're going to see where we can learn from each other. And that was, it was like a peer discussion model and peer-to-peer learning sort of community. That was cool. And then I think in my fifth year, around the time I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, regardless of whether I got into HBS or not. And of course, at that time, I genuinely didn't think I was going to get in. Sayam, my roommate, and now my co-founder at Blame Crazy, he used to do a lot of the design and photography, videography on campus, all the societies. A lot of them owe Sayam for the logos that he's made for them. He's done a lot of stuff on campus. And, I think at one point, one of his clients wanted a website. And I all my life, I've been very into coding, more as a hobby, not particularly proficient at it. But we decided to do the website together. That went extremely well. And we were like, and I think we got paid, I think somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000. We were like, oh, this is, great. This is the life. It took us only like 2 weeks to do that sort of thing. And we were like, we need to start an agency. And it was obviously completely as a hobby because, at that time I had no idea what I wanted to do. So we were just doing basic things. We were doing design, logos and websites. And, if anyone wanted some video editing, we were doing that. And then someone asked us to do packaging for a chocolate brand. It was someone on campus. We did, I don't know how many designs, and we made 4,000 rupees. And we were like, okay, we can do packaging. And then someone asked us to do an animated video on Siam. Like, I remember, a few nights sort of figured out how to do it. And he was like, okay, we can do animation. And then I remember right before my last semester, I was doing an internship and I got a call from someone saying, we heard about Plain Crazy. And this was not someone we knew socially, which was great. And we were like, and she was, it was an NGO. And they were like, we have this concert we do to help raise money. And we'd love for you guys to do social media. And I called Sayam and I was like, I have no idea how to do digital marketing. Do you? And he was like, no, but we'd figure it out. And we were like, okay, what? I guess we're also a digital marketing agency now. Um, and so we started doing that, and then we got back to campus. And at that time, I don't think they realized we were law students, and they were like, we need someone to come cover this rehearsal for us in Bombay. And we were like, oh shit, now what? So we got on board this freelancer who then happened to become the first Plain Crazy employee and a partner of the company. And she went and covered the entire rehearsal and helped us with the digital marketing piece. And we were like, okay, now we're a digital marketing agency as well. And I think the closer we got to graduation, the more we sort of realized that, okay, there are people outside of campus who want us. There are people outside of campus who are willing to pay for our services. We're learning a lot. We're working with companies, helping them sort of market, helping them build websites, helping them brand. This is great experience, more than anything, it's not necessarily something I saw myself doing, building websites, helping other companies launch, helping other companies market. But I think, I realized that, okay, I don't really know what it's like in the real world to be an entrepreneur. So this is a great experience. I'm going to be able to learn from other people, learn from other people's mistakes, learn while helping other people build their own companies. And, I think that's something I'm pretty passionate about. I love building, love sort of developing. So I think that was a great experience. And, Plain Crazy has been great. I'm still involved. I happened to sort of, I transitioned out of day-to-day operations in December, more from the perspective of a pre-MBA experience. I wanted to do a couple of things before I go, but I still, of course, get on call with Plain Crazy every day, still very much involved. And I think with Plain Crazy, we've had a great experience. We've rebranded, several companies. We've done a rebrand for India's largest PR conference. We've worked with Ford. We've worked with MTV. We did a huge branding project for MIT. We've worked with Cambridge. We've worked with Cornell. We've worked with a lot of big companies in India. Some really exciting projects I'm not allowed to talk about, but even now we're working with a couple of companies in the US, the UK. I think we're very grateful for that, very grateful for what the experience has been like. And, it's very much a company. We still have a full team. Sayam is now pretty much running it day to day on his own. But yes, that's pretty much the journey. I then started with Dr. Vaidya's, in December of last year. But so that's been, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year of law school, and what I'm doing after.
Great. Wow. You've been very, very busy. I think that's quite evident. I want to just go back to a few things that you said, if you don't mind me asking some questions. So how many years has Plain Crazy been open now, or been taking?
So we started in September of our final year. So September 2017 was when we had, and I mean, we literally put together a logo and a website in 2 weeks, and we were like, okay, now we have a company. And then when we graduated in May 2018, that's when we made it into a full-time thing. Sayam's actually from Chandigarh, but we had to try it out for a few months before he sort of left everything and moved to Bombay, which he did in August, September. So 2017 September, full-time since May 2018. And we moved into an office, I think, around December 2018 and started putting together a much bigger team. That's when we got our second employee. And we've sort of fluctuated. We've been 11 employees at a time. We've moved down to 7, 8, depending on, we also in between expanded our offerings a lot. We started doing data analytics. We set up a sister company called 405 Analytics. But then when I sort of transitioned out, some of the tech and analytics services we stopped providing. And now we're primarily a branding and design agency, and we still do a bit of marketing. We still do a lot of videos, animations. But the way we sort of look at ourselves is as a branding and design agency at the core.
Okay, great. And I'll have a few more questions for you all the way at the end. Yeah. So that was through JGU. And now for the past 3 years, you've been working with Plain Crazy and then moving on into CEO's office of this Ayurveda company. Now, this might be a loaded question, but what are you seeing for the next few years? I mean, you do have HBS on the docket, but what are you thinking, if you don't mind me asking, for balancing all these things? And what are your next steps?
So I think, difficult question to answer. I don't have a definite answer to that. right now just enjoying the entrepreneurship experience. Obviously one of the reasons I chose Dr. Vaidya's in the CEO's office role was that it's a great company, been around for 100 years, been funded by a very reputed investor. I'm sorry, not 100 years, 100, around 100 employees, been around for 3.5 years now. And it's an Ayurveda company, but it's primarily an e-commerce company. So we're completely online. It's a very tech focused, tech driven company. I get to work in the CEO's office. I get to work on a lot of projects that the CEO is working on. I work on new tech improvements, UI, UX, customer retention, marketing, social media, whatever the CEO needs to look at, I look at. I work on new initiatives. I'm working on a couple of new features on the website, setting up, whatever it may be. And I think that's helping me learn a lot. It's very different from Plain Crazy in that sense. I'm also sort of, consulting with a solar energy company that's very new development, but a solar energy investment platform based out of Bombay that's been backed by Y Combinator, backed by LSC. So that's been a good experience as well. I'm just trying to, see how much I can learn pre-MBA, do whatever I can to sort of contribute, help people, and obviously, learn myself as well. I also recently started this newsletter with a friend called The Skeptic Investor. So we're sort of putting out a lot of content related to entrepreneurship. We do a weekly newsletter. I'll post the link later in case anyone wants to subscribe. We've only done 3 issues so far, but that's been a lot of fun, a lot of learning. So I think, pre-MBA, I'm just looking at it as how much can I learn? Where can I sort of contribute? How can I grow? I think I've been very lucky to get into this, to have this HBS program there. And, no matter what happens, with actually one of the professors, when I was at HBS last year, when we were doing the MIT project, I flew out to Boston. And I was lucky enough to sort of attend a class at HBS, and the professor was like, when I was like, oh, should I come next year? Should I come in 2021? And he was like, why are you in a rush to come? You're in a very privileged position where regardless of what you do, you're ending up at HBS. So, make the most of the time you have, do what you can, learn as much as you can. And it's only going to benefit you when you sort of start the MBA. So great advice, doing that, sort of following that as much as I can. I think post MBA, I'm obviously very interested in entrepreneurship, would love to start a company of my own again. Also very interested though in VC, would love to sort of invest in companies, help people build out their own companies. So trying to figure that out, to see what opportunities come my way. Obviously, one part I sort of left out was that when I started Plain Crazy, the idea was to keep coding and be able to sort of build a legal tech company of my own. That's something I definitely want to do. Miss the law quite a bit. I do want to start a legal tech company. So maybe, hopefully at some time.
Yeah, I'm sure if there's anyone that's going to get it done, I'm sure it's going to be you. So let's, I think, my big takeaway is that it's been a lot of learning going on for you through proactive action that you're taking, but then also just absorbing what's around you. So let's have you speak a little bit about this idea of finding your business idea, identifying your passion, identifying problem points. I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs who are attending this webinar. So, yeah. I mean, what would you have to say in regards to
that? So I think that's something, I've thought about a lot because, obviously any aspiring entrepreneur, anyone interested in entrepreneurship will have ideas coming in every day. Maybe, it's like you have hundreds of ideas, thousands of ideas. How do you know which one to choose? How do you know which one to sort of focus on? How do you know which one to execute? I think finding your passion sounds very cliche and very generic, but I think that's very important, and I think this sort of struck me when we started working on Plain Crazy. That semester, my first semester of my final year, I had to make up all the classes that I had not done while I was on exchange. So I already had an extra workload, but then I also decided to TA for a course. And then I also had to prepare for GMAT because I was working on my MBA application. So suddenly I had like thousands of things happening. And then we also started Plain Crazy. And then suddenly I realized that, okay, there is really no time, there's, people say you can find time for things you love, but there was really no time. But literally, it would be till like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I'd finish all my school classwork. I'd finish my GMAT prep. I'd finish, whatever else needed to be done. And then at 1:32, I'd be absolutely dead. And Sam would be like, okay, let's start working on Playing Crazy stuff now. And I thought it was absolutely crazy. But, we truly like had a lot of fun working on it. I think that's really important. Um, and I think, most people who started a company or trying to start a company will realize this at some point, but it's a very lonely and not so exciting process. It's great when, I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs who, and even me now, I'm like, oh, the journey was great. But when you're actually in the journey, it's absolutely horrid. It's like late nights, very lonely, people not really understanding, dealing with a lot of issues. Um, so unless it's something you're truly passionate about, I don't think it's something you're going to be able to work on. So, when you're picking an idea, there are a lot of great ideas. And, I think you see, all these statistics about how many companies fail. And I think most companies fail not because the idea was not good, but more because the execution was not good. And usually execution is not good because you're starting the company. You're like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, so I'll start this company. Or, oh, I want to sell, raise a lot of money and then sell out, so I'm going to start this. It doesn't really work like that. It's, in some cases maybe, but I think for most entrepreneurs in most cases, to be able to put in those long hours, to be able to work till 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. regularly, it's going to have to be something you have fun doing, because otherwise you're going to absolutely hate it. And, you're going to treat it like a job. You can't treat it like a job if you wanted to really succeed. So I think in that sense, finding your passion is really important. With aspect of the pain points, I think, what's really important is that when you have an idea, try and think of it from the perspective of, okay, is this a problem you're facing? So most companies tend to solve a problem. So if you think about Sleepy Owl, for example, since they're alumni, their entire problem that they set out to solve was that we want good coffee, but it shouldn't take, it shouldn't be this complicated brewing process where you have like 10 different things and you need to sit there and like half an hour, like trying to figure out how to get it right. And you mess up one small proportion and suddenly you have half an hour worked on it and like not very good coffee. So I think it's important to sort of, they had that problem, they went about solving that problem. Very safe to assume that if you're facing a problem and you're trying to solve it, many people have that problem. So even, great example of this is Spanx. I know Sarah Blakely talks about this a lot, but she had, she faced an issue. She was like, okay, if I'm facing this issue, a lot of women are facing this issue, and she went about solving it. And I mean, the rest was sort of history. Made $1 billion very quickly. But that's what happens, I think if it's a company, if you're starting a company for the sake of it, that idea, it might seem good, it might seem great, but it might just be a problem that no one's facing. And if you're solving a problem no one's facing, no one's going to pay you to solve that problem. So I think it's very important to focus on that problem point. What is the problem you're facing? And what is this, how are you going about solving this problem? And I think that's what really sets apart great companies from, just regular companies.
Yeah, I think, you've hit on two very, very good and clear points. One being that execution, well, a lot of people have a lot of good ideas, but execution is the big differentiation between what actually happens and what creates a good company versus just having a good idea and having a good strategy. I think I've personally seen that myself, where I talk to a lot of great people with wonderful ideas, but when it comes to actually doing the hard work of building, putting it to paper, making the changes that needed, that sometimes the ideas do fall apart. So execution, of course, is very, very important, and just important as strategy. And the second point being that, yeah, a problem that is probably a problem that you should help solve rather than something else. So, I mean, if we move on next to, let's say, starting a team, how did you identify your future team members? How did you begin to employ? I know you touched on it in your story, how a lot of them did come from JGU, but what was that process like from being the person that's doing everything to then all of a sudden trying to delegate that work? And how was that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So when I started, so I think right at the top, if you're able to find a co-founder, nothing like it, it really, really helps. There'll be days when you really don't want to work and your co-founder can motivate you, your co-founder can take over, your co-founder can sort of work on it. Um, I think, you really don't have to, or you don't necessarily need to start, have a co-founder to start up, but I think it really helps. Most people I talk to who have co-founders speak to the power of having someone around through the journey. So I think that was really helpful, having Sayam around, one of the most talented people I know. Never met anyone who works even half as hard as him. And I think that really motivated me as well. It's like, okay, if he can work at 4 a.m., I can work at 4 a.m. Or like, even when when he moved to Bombay, I was like, okay, this guy knows no one in Bombay. He's sort of uprooted his entire life, moved to Bombay for this. We used to spend, there was a couple of months in the beginning and in the middle where if we left office before midnight, it was like, oh, this is an early day, which isn't ideal. It's not like everyone needs to sort of, you want to avoid burnout. You don't want to push to the point where you're really not even functioning at your 100%. But, there are days when you're going to have to put in as much work as you can. And doing that alone or doing that with a team or a co-founder that you don't necessarily get along with, it's never going to happen. And I think another thing when you're looking for a co-founder, it needs to be someone who complements your skills. There's no point, if Sayam and I both were tech people, it would probably make no sense to work together unless we were starting a tech company, of course. But, for a creative agency, the fact that I could handle the tech and the business side of things, he could handle the design side of things, that made our life much easier. We didn't need anyone else when we got started. And obviously, as we sort of grew, we were able to hire more people. So yeah, just to clarify there, we actually have no people. We've had a few interns come from JGU, but we've never actually, no one from our full-time team has ever been from JGU. But we sort of, I think when you're hiring, the main things to sort of focus on are, what are you looking to hire for? So do you just need someone to help because your work is getting too much? But what is the skill set you're looking for? What is the personality you're looking for? I think, that's one thing that gets lost a lot. So, okay, say we were looking for someone to help us with digital marketing. We knew exactly the idea. We actually knew exactly what we were looking for in that sense. So we sort of knew what the job description was. We knew what sort of profile we were trying to fit. We got lucky. Our first employee, our partner, she is an influencer as well. So had a lot of experience working with brands, digital marketing as well. But that's not all that matters, right? The culture matters a lot. And, I think it's really, at that time, a lot of people thought we were very silly for sort of, we had a culture deck very soon into starting the company. I mean, after we had hired our first two people, but we decided to set out and we have this huge culture deck about the values that we look for, the values that everyone who works for Plain Crazy needs to embody. What is it that you are truly trying to reach for? What is our aim? What is our mission? Who do we represent? I think at all times that's important, because especially when you're an entrepreneur, when you start a company, when you have a team of 4 or 5, you want to make sure that everyone is representing your company in the way you envision it. At some point, you're not going to be able to talk to everyone who wants to know about your company. Or, obviously your employees will go out and be talking about your company, and it isn't ideal to have them talk about the company in a way that's not the way you want to talk about it, not the way you envision. So I think in that perspective, the culture deck helped a lot. And sticking to hiring people who fit your culture is very important. Otherwise, especially in an early stage company, again, as I've said this a lot, but you're going to be putting in a lot of hours. You're going to be spending a lot of time together. I literally didn't see anyone else for weeks. It was just them, and I'd come home and go to sleep, and then them again the next day. So if you're not getting along, you're eating lunch together, you're eating dinner together, you're basically like spending all your time together. If you're not getting along with the people that you work with, when it's like 4 people, 5 people, if y'all don't get along with each other, y'all don't have to be best friends, but if you can't, if you're not being able to spend time with each other, it's not going to work out. So that culture aspect is really important when you're putting together a team as well. And one I think a lot of people tend to overlook in the beginning.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And we have some questions coming in the chat box that are on this idea of like cool. Personal relationships, and we'll get to them. So thank you for for the guys that have put their questions in the chat box. But let's continue on this idea of developing your idea, right? So you saw this opportunity come up. with branding, with creative. And right now I'm just focusing on Plain Crazy, but if you want to talk about your other different initiatives that you're a part of, please feel free to do so. I mean, what do you think you really need to develop an idea?
Yeah, so that's the important one. So I think, that's why I sort of, and these were all learnings from Tea Launcher. Yeah, I absolutely loved my idea of Tea Launcher. I believed in it a lot. We had a great website. Um, but I pulled the plug, and, when I think back on it now, like I was saying, right, I don't fully regret it. Actually, I don't really regret it at all. I think I was able to learn a lot. Um, but just from that perspective, I think developing your idea is obviously, I mean, that's the execution and that's the most important bit. But a lot of things I was able to learn from Startup Academy. I know Jeremy introduced me to the Lean Business Model Canvas. That's something I recommend to everyone who's looking at an idea. It's basically like a little, it's one pager which has, different components, and it helps you really flesh out your idea and see what you need in terms of resources, in terms of who's the audience you're going for, what are the resources you need, and so on and so forth. But I think from that perspective, that's step one. I always tell people, fill in the Lean Business Model Canvas. It'll help you truly flesh out your idea, because it's great to say, okay, I'm starting a social networking website for artists. Okay, cool. Your target audience is artists, and you need tech, or you need this social networking website built. But I think, what about like the resources? How are you going to build it? How much money do you need? How are you going to market it? Who else can be a potential target audience? How are you going to make money from it? These are all things that get really important, and these are things that you need to flesh out. I think another important part about developing your idea, and one that I struggled with a bit earlier, was getting the right resources. So at eLauncher, at that time, I knew how to code, but I wasn't really confident enough to code this on my own. So I decided to outsource it to an agency. So I remember I was already in college. I put up like a project requirement on a freelance website, interviewed 20 different tech companies, chose one. They did a great job. It was fun working with them. But I think nowadays there's just so many other resources, even if you're not a tech person, there's so many code sort of tools. I actually stumbled upon that one the other day, where for like $200, you can sort of have all the code and like a drag and drop builder for something exactly like Facebook, or exactly like Airbnb, or exactly like Tinder. You don't need to code at all. You have everything there, and for like really small investments, you can sort of work on these things yourself. So I think that's something that people need to sort of explore a bit more. The resources that you get. So yeah, just in terms of the tech, in terms of hiring, how, like, we touched upon hiring as well. And yeah, so just in that sense, I think it's really required, or it's really necessary to be clear on what exactly your idea is, to flesh it out completely. And then also each of those components. So, okay, if this is my target audience, how are you going to reach that target audience? What is your brand message? What is your brand design? What is your marketing strategy? Okay, I have a tech component. I don't really know how to code. Should I try building it out on my own using a no code tool? Can I find someone to help me? Can I find a tech co-founder? Okay, I need so much money to go about it. Do I need to raise money? Can I take money from my parents? Can I use the money that I've saved? Very often you don't need that much money to start. We started Tea Launcher with, I think, less than 100, around 80, 90,000. We had everything sort of developed. Even cheaper nowadays, probably, I'd say. So it's not like you need huge investment. I mean, you usually need some investment at some point, but just being mindful in terms of that. What do I need to do on the legal front? What do I need to do in terms of registration of my company? What do I need to do on the social media front? What do I need to do on the email, website, just general professionalism front? So I think that's really important. I think another thing that people sort of ignore when they start a company is basic things like having a website, or even if they have a website, having email IDs. A lot of people use Gmail IDs, and they're like, okay, when we're big enough, we'll switch. I think that if you're starting a company, you might as well double down. It looks a lot more professional to have Mishaal at plaincrazystudios.com. especially once you graduate from college and you're working with bigger companies. Like I said, we've worked with a lot of big companies. Having Mishaal at gmail.com would not be the same as having Mishaal at crazystudios.com, business cards, logos, all of that. So I think that's important. So when you're developing your idea, sort of working on all of this, but it's also, really important to not get caught up. It's very, very easy to get caught up in it. Like I did T-Launch. I was like, we literally had everything ready. I'd spoken to people. We had artists on board. We had done a round of beta testing. And I was like, oh, it's not ready. I could do this better. Oh, it's not ready. I could do this better. And it's very easy to get stuck in that loop because it's never going to be perfect. It truly never is. There's always room for improvement. And you see that with every company around the world, right? Apple releases a new phone every year because it can be better. Or apps, any app you download has a new update every week or every month at least, because you can always get better. But at some point you need to start. So I think, develop the idea, get opinions from people not connected to you. It's important to sort of talk to people who aren't necessarily saying yes and, encouraging you. You need people telling you the truth. The encouragement is necessary, so don't get me wrong, but you need people who will tell you this is absolute rubbish, like you need to do better. So I think that's important as well when you're working on your idea, to just one day be like, okay, when I reach this point where I have all these features built out, or I'm able to offer all these services, I'm just going to launch. And then as and when we see what people really need, what people are responding to, what people are using, then we're going to really, we can continue working on the idea. But for now, I just need to take the plunge, sort of like jump or take the lunge and launch the company.
So I'm going to ask you a little bit of a different question, if you don't mind.
No, of course.
So, I mean, you've tried out a lot of things, and I think failure as an entrepreneur is part of the process and part of the deal. So can you talk a little bit about failure, how to manage it, expectations around it, fear of it, just, what has your experience been around just the concept of failure? Because no one goes into starting a business hoping that it fails, right? Everyone is expecting it to succeed and have those dreams, and then what happens when it doesn't turn out exactly as you thought? And self-management as well as team management.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting over there, a couple of months ago, I was at this talk where the founder of Matrix, the venture capital firm, Matrix Investment Partners, was speaking. And, he's one of my, I really look up to him. He went to IIT, went to HBS, had founded a company, got acquired by eBay. He ran eBay for a bit, and then sort of founded Matrix and has, great investment track record. They've done Ola, they've done a lot of big deals. And he was talking about this. And, what he said was that, and I completely agree, this is something, I've always said, a lot of people say, oh, failure is great, celebrate failure, don't sort of mind, if you fail, no problem, get up and try again. I don't really agree with that, and that's exactly what he said. He said, that's absolute rubbish. I don't think failure is great, and you'll, not to say you should, it's a horrible thing to fail. We've all failed and we all will fail. And I know I'm going to fail a lot moving forward, but it's not really something that like you're saying, right? No one goes into a company trying to be like, oh, I'm going to fail, and oh, that's great, and I'm going to learn. At some point, failure teaches you what not to do, but it never really teaches you what to do. So, it's not necessarily the greatest thing in the world. And, one way that, Sayam and I looked at failure as well was that at some point we were like, okay, now we have a team. We have a team of 11 people. These are people who all rely on us every month. We pay their salaries. They go home, whatever. Obviously, some of them were very young, but there were people who, needed the money, who were using the money to feed their family, like some of the older people. It's like, it's obviously really important. You have a lot of people relying on you. You've put in so many hours, so many days, so many years, whatever, building out this idea. So, everyone has that, every entrepreneur has that avoid failure at all cost mentality. I mean, obviously you're going to fail at some point though. And I think what's really important when you fail is to just not let it hit your self-esteem, right? Maybe you weren't well prepared enough. Maybe you hadn't put together the right team. Maybe it was just circumstances. Like, just think about today, right? how many companies are going to fail because of just because of the current situation with COVID. These are unavoidable circumstances. These are things that no one really um, can. I mean, ideally, you want to think that oh, I've planned for every situation, but some cases you just can't. So I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world to fail, and I I think it's more about how you sort of bounce back from it, what you take from it, and how you sort of apply those learnings to the next round. I think the most important thing is just to realize that, you know, sorry, yeah, I think the most important thing to realize is just that there is a lot or everyone fails. We see a lot of big entrepreneurs fail. Most entrepreneurs, or most successful entrepreneurs, it's very often not their first company, which means they have failed before or not reached the desired level of success anymore. It's just important to not let that bog you down and sort of just keep moving forward.
Yeah, great answer, and I completely agree. So let me ask you about being a young entrepreneur. Okay? And what do you wish that you were taught or told as a young person who wanted to start a company and who wanted to be an entrepreneur that you realized you had to learn the hard way?
So yeah, so like I said, I was very lucky to have Jeremy around for most of my college life, in the sense that I had someone to guide me. I had someone to sort of go to for advice whenever I needed it. I think it's very important to have a couple of mentors like that, at least one. And as you sort of progress in your journey, chances are you will have a few people that you can sort of call at any time, people you look up to, and people whose advice you take very seriously. Um, so I think establishing those mentor relationships as soon as you can, very important. Other than that, just a couple of things that I've been talking about. One is that you always hear people talking about the journey and how great it is, but like I said, right, when you're in the journey, it feels like the worst thing in the world. When we lost the first person we had to let someone go at Plane Crazy, I don't think anyone could have prepared me for that. The first time we lost a client at Plane Crazy, I don't think anyone could prepare me for that. Every rejection we got, we would pitch for a lot of projects in the beginning. Every rejection kind of sucked. No one could really prepare you for that. There are a lot of things, that you're not, no matter what anyone says, you're not going to be prepared for. But that's all part of the learning process, and it might feel really bad or might completely suck at the given time. But these are just things that have to be done, of course, as an entrepreneur. I think also just in terms of, like I said, we paid very big fines when we didn't have very much money at Plane Crazy for TDS, sort of messing up a filing of our TDS returns. There was a lot of confusion on, the GST threshold. They kept changing. A lot of these accounting terms, norms, laws change very often. We obviously didn't do a very good job of keeping up. And so it's important to have someone, I think, help with that. You very often will think, especially when you start up, that, oh, it's only larger companies that need to worry about all this. We're too small to worry about this. But that's not a great mindset to have, right? You're trying to be a large company, you're trying to be a big company, so you need to act like one. So I think it's important to sort of get all of that in place as well. And I think, just generally, what I wish someone had told me was that, building, having the idea, and sort of executing the idea or once you've executed the idea, all of that stuff is really easy. But it's that in between part where you're sort of trying to develop that idea and actually follow through on it. That's the most difficult part. With Plane Crazy, we were able to start very quickly, but we faced obviously a lot of issues in the beginning, and any entrepreneur, any company will face. But just you read about it. You read about entrepreneurs working like really long nights. People are like, oh, we slept in the office, and you're like, how much work can someone have that you can't do it the next day? You're just thinking like, oh, these people are sort of glorifying hard work, or like sort of romanticizing the idea of the hustle, so to say. But it's not like that. It's not a romantic notion at all when you're actually there at 2 a.m. haven't really eaten, trying to finish a presentation for the next day, or trying to like finish a website because a client's not happy, or trying to do something that you need to get done, doesn't feel great at all, doesn't feel like you're glorifying anything. And can definitely be very lonely, a lot of self-doubt, especially for us. I think we were two law students when we started a creative agency. Neither of us had any formal training in what we were trying to do. So, obviously in the beginning, you're going to have a bit of this imposter syndrome. Like, I remember the first time we got a big client, or the first time we started working with MTV, we did a huge marketing campaign for one of their shows. And we were just like, what is happening? Like, we're two law students, or two lawyers now, and we're like out here crafting marketing campaigns for MTV. That's absolutely ridiculous. But obviously very grateful for where the journey took us. And I think you just need to keep believing in yourself. One thing Sayam and I always did, and anyone who asks us about our law background, I think our law background, or not having a background in what we were doing, sort of helped us, because a lot of other agencies we work with, a lot of designers we work with, a lot of marketing professionals we work with, they've studied this in school and that's what they know. Yeah. So say someone has learned UI UX, they know UI UX, they'll be really good at it, but that's it. That's what they know. For us, it was like, we know nothing. So we will learn whatever you want us to do, right? So if someone asked us, we did actually a big UI UX project for a real estate developer. We've done a rebrand for a real estate developer. Like I said, we worked with MTV before, we've worked with many universities. We've worked with a lot of startups. We've done 3D design. We've done AR filters. We've done, we worked with Everest Industries. We worked with a listed company on the New York Stock Exchange in the US on a branding project. So these are all things that, when we talk about it now, we're like, how did we go from being a law student we didn't even know, like Sayam didn't even have Illustrator on his laptop. We had to sort of learn all of that. We didn't even know how to animate a GIF. But I think that's really important, like the fact that we didn't have the background in it meant that we were always willing to push harder than anyone else there. So we were like, okay, we'll learn how to do this. We don't know how to do it. That's okay. We'll learn. If someone else can do it, we can do it. There was never any questions or there was never anything, we hate saying no to projects. And so we were like, okay, if someone else knows how to do this, why can't we know how to do this? I can't tell you how many online courses we've gone through, how many YouTube videos we've watched, how many times we've sort of tried to do something and failed miserably. But I think that's a very important attitude to have, right? It's like, you need to constantly be learning as an entrepreneur. And you never need to, it should never be like, oh, this can't be done. That's not a very like entrepreneur-like mindset. It's like, okay, if you want it done, I'll get it done, sort of thing. And I think that's also really important for people to just keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, for full disclosure, even we've reached out to Plain Crazy for quite a few projects. And I have to say, everything that Mishaal is saying he lives up to it. It's always been a pleasure to work with the Plain Crazy team, an incredibly, incredibly strong culture. And I will commend you on that. It's always been a wonderful pleasure to work with you guys. So you really do put your money where your mouth is on this. So it's been about close to an hour somehow. It's always so great to talk to you. So I think we'll just quickly transition over to some of the questions that we have. Let's start at the beginning. So Akash is asking a bit of a personal question. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay. What were your experiences on the relationships with your colleagues, families, partners through, I guess, the startup process? And it's a great question, Akash. I think not a lot of people are brave enough to ask this and brave enough to share. But yeah, also, what were your personal expenses and lifestyle during the entrepreneurship journey? What were you learning? This I'm not sure if you can. We might leave out the last part of the question. That's a bit too personal, Akash. But let's try to start with the other parts of the question. What was your, personal relationships like with your family, with your colleagues through the startup journey with Plain Crazy, for example? How did you manage?
So I think, it's a great question, and I think, maybe not so much directly for me, because I was lucky enough to be living at home while I started up, because our office is in Bombay. I'm from Bombay. I think a little more very true for Sayam. He's, in the beginning few months, he was living with me, of course, but then at some point he sort of moved out and got his own house. and just making sure that we can cover that, because I mean it's not ideal to sort of him to move to a new city, his parents to support him doing something completely random, and then having them to pay for it. So that was something that we always kept in mind. um I think in terms of, just to get to the first bit, experiences on relationships, like I'm saying, right, you're going to spend so much time, like I was saying, Sayam was literally living with me. He was living in my house for a couple of months. So if your relationship isn't like great, and even through college we lived together for 4 years in the same apartment, um if you don't have a great relationship with someone you're working with basically 24/7, it's going to be really bad, to say the least. So I think it's really important to have a very strong relationship with the people you work with. Now, we've had people who've been at Plane Crazy for 2 years, 1.5 years. Everyone on our team's a little smaller now because we stopped doing other offerings. We're around 5 people. But I think the person who joined last is about to complete a year this month. So now everyone's been together for a long time. Um, and I think in very many ways we look at each other like almost as a family, right? Doesn't mean we're the best of friends and we spend every waking moment together outside of the office, but you're talking to these people 24/7. You're seeing them every day in the office. Sometimes you're even spending time with them outside the office. And especially as an entrepreneur, especially in an early stage company, you want to be sure that you can rely on everyone, right? So there are days where you will not be well, you will not be able to do something, you will not be able to go somewhere, and you need to rely on your team to do that. So I think that experience is very important. Personal expenses, lifestyle, again, over there, right? So even not even just personal expenses, but how we manage the office expenses. Obviously it's important to find that fine line where you're treating your team well. So we would do like a every month team lunch, or we would or like every time there was a birthday in the team, you order cake for the person, you do what you can. You need to keep morale up, you need to keep people happy, and honestly, right, you need to treat people the way you would want to be treated as well. I think that's very important. But obviously when you don't have much money in the beginning and stuff, to do these things, but I don't think that's a problem at all. Everyone sort of knows that, everyone you're working with that sort of respects that. And obviously the restaurants that we're able to do our team lunches at today are very different from the restaurants that we had to go in the beginning when we were doing team lunches. But again, very grateful for that. It's been a long journey and sort of to get where we are, and there's a long way ahead to keep going. But I think I don't think that's necessarily something that's very difficult. Personal expenses, yeah, you do cut down. Like I said, right, I was lucky enough to not have to pay rent. First few months until we were making money, we were working from home until we were able to afford an office. And even when we did get an office, we were renting like one room in someone else's office. So you do what you can. You need to. It's not all like the way it seems in like books or movies or whatever, right? It's you start really small and you grow if and when you can. But I think all of that is secondary. None of that really matters because you're so focused on making your idea work that it doesn't matter if you're working in your house. It doesn't matter if you're working in the office. It doesn't matter if you have like, the best computers. So I remember when we started off, Sayam's computer, if we needed to render something, like when we first did an animated video, we would have to keep it aside with nothing else running for like 3 hours to just get like one video out because it was really underpowered. But, we just didn't have, at that point, we didn't want to like, ask again parents to like keep buying us new things. It was like, when we have the money, we're going to buy our own laptops, so we're going to buy whatever we need. And, touch wood, luckily at some point we got to a position where we were able to do that. So, but, I don't think any of that matters. I think, as long as you want to work on your idea and you're truly sort of passionate about it, you'll make it happen no matter the circumstances.
And I think Mishaal, you would agree with me here that you need to have very forgiving friends and family who are part of the process.
100%. So I forgot to touch on that. But I was talking to someone about this the other day, but it would be like I'd get messages from friends, like my closest friends in Bombay who live right near me, like, oh, we haven't seen you in 2 months. And I was like, oh, it's been 2 months. Like, doesn't feel like it, but I'm really sorry. Like this weekend I will come out or whatever.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying, right? It's really important that it doesn't feel like work. The moment it feels like work, you're living on this sort of routine where it's like, oh, it's the weekend, I need to go out. Oh, I need a break. We never felt like we needed a break. It would be like midnight, we'd be like, oh, it's midnight. Like we wouldn't even realize. And I think that's really important. So that's why you need to be working with people you really get along with, and you need to be working on an idea that you're truly passionate about. Otherwise, it's always going to feel like a struggle.
Yeah, great answer. Let's see. Next, we'll just go in order here. Nihan's asked me, you have invested time in multiple ventures over the years. What advice do you have in terms of time management for someone who's trying to work on different things while studying or working? You've touched on this a bit, but do you have any further thoughts on this in regards to time management while studying or working?
Yeah, so just on this front, I have a very bad habit, and I used to do this in college as well, where I would take on sometimes more than I can handle. And that's not ideal. That's, it's not great. And you sort of learn once you do it. Obviously for most people on this chat as well, you're going to have a lot of opportunities coming your way, and you don't have to say yes to everything. You need to say yes to things that you can truly benefit from and where you think you can also contribute as well. In terms of time management, I think it really depends from person to person and what your circumstances are. But like I said, right, so just to give an example of when we started Plane Crazy, I had 6 classes that semester. I was a TA. I had 5 classes that semester. I was a TA. I was preparing for GMAT. I was preparing for MBA applications. I was also doing whatever stuff with the legal entrepreneurship cell and JSIE, and I had started Plane Crazy. And just at that point, it was like, I think I was just like, wait, I've taken on way too much. But it never felt like that, It's like, again, these were all things I really like doing. These were things that I love doing. And sure, I didn't have time to really like go out, or I didn't have time to sort of, hang with friends too much. And sometimes, I miss it when I think back to college. I was like, okay, wait, I wish I had like hung a little more with friends or whatever. But I think overall, I had a great time, So if I was working at 2 a.m. on Plane Crazy, it's not because I had to. No one forced us to work on Plane Crazy. At that time, no one even knew about Plane Crazy. It was like, we wanted to do this, so we're doing it. Or even with JSI, even with the legal entrepreneurship cell, right? It's not like Jeremy was ever there like, oh, you have to do this, you need to submit this. It was like, I want to do this. I really like doing this, So I think when you think about things like that, it becomes a lot easier on the time management front. Obviously classes were a little more difficult to manage, but then again, right, I had a goal. I knew I was working towards an MBA program, and I knew my CGPA would matter a lot. So it was always like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm focusing on prioritizing classwork because I know how important that is. I know how important GMAT is. And then after that, if I have time or if I'm feeling up to it, I'm going to work on Plane Crazy. And more often than not, we were up to it just because we had so much fun working on it together. So I think when you're studying, obviously, it's important to sort of set out your goals. What is it that you're truly working for? And accordingly, try prioritizing different tasks. Like the sort of famous adage goes, or the famous quote goes, is like, everyone has 24 hours in the day. And I think genuinely it comes down to a matter of priority. It's very easy for anyone or even me to say like, oh, I have no time to do this. But, if it was the most important thing to me in the world, I know I would find time to do it. So it's important to prioritize, see what you're working towards, why you're working for it, and then accordingly sort of manage your time.
On a tangent, quick question. Do you have any like routines that you do, or a type of, to organize things in the morning? Is there something that, like you sit down with the paper and make a to-do list, or do you have anything like that? Any tips for maybe Nihan who's looking for help for time management? Or all of them?
Not necessarily, I know I've tried, like, so when we were Plane Crazy, I've never been a morning person, never. So usually especially when we were Plane Crazy, because we would work till so late, I would usually go into office the next day at like 10:30, 11. I'd come home at like 11:30, 12, or 10:30, 11 on a normal day. Sleep for like 8-9 hours and then go back to the office the next day at 10:30, 11. Obviously deferred from day to day, but that would usually be my schedule. Yeah, at Plane Crazy, I would usually make paper, like a to-do list. Whenever it sort of came to that, we had a big whiteboard where we would write things, and it would be great. Whoever finished the task would go and strike it off the board. Great feeling. Now, I have like this task management app called Things I use currently that helps. I think, I don't have any of those routines where I wake up at like 5 a.m., exercise, then check my email and then make like a task list for the day. I wish I did, I feel like that would be great, and maybe hopefully at some point, but no, it's usually, But yeah, when I wake up in the morning, I usually try seeing everything that I need to do for the day. I just think when you're an entrepreneur, that sort of gets, that never holds true. As you know, it's like you'll wake up in the morning with a plan to do 10 things and you'll end the day doing 10 different things. Um,
And
so
sorry,
I think it's, tough
what
to
app
plan for
do you use?
things.
Things.
Things 3. I'll send you a link to it. So it lets you just arrange different projects and then different task lists within those projects. So if you're working on multiple things, it's a good way to sort of go about it. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are many tools that people sort of use for this. Um, but yeah, I don't have a routine as such, but I do think it's very important. Or I at least benefit personally a lot from just knowing exactly what needs to get done. And then you can go about prioritizing what's the most important and sort of allocate time in the day to it. So, very often I'll wake up in the day, and even if I'm not writing it down or whatever, I'll be like literally lying in bed. I'll be like, okay, before lunch, I'm going to get this done after lunch. Because, it's sometimes like, especially when I was at Plane Crazy, I would like, some days I would just wake up and I'm like, oh, I really want to code today. And there'd be like, say 2 or 3 websites pending. And I'm like, okay, till like evening, I'm just going to work on the websites because that's what I'm in the mood to do. Or some days I just won't feel like coding at all. And I'll be like, okay, I want to work on like just business development, new clients, marketing plans. So then I'll work on that. So I think, there's no hard and fast rule that I follow or nothing that I sort of stick to in that sense. But yeah, it is important to know what you need to do so you don't forget it, and also prioritize, just so you don't miss out on anything important.
Nikita's here asking, what would be your advice and experience in asking people for help? This is a great question. It can be very difficult.
Yeah, it's a great question. So as I touched upon briefly, in the beginning, I was lucky to have Jeremy around JSIE, was in touch with a couple of people working on startups. I had a couple of seniors, Arman or Shujit, who had worked on a startup. I actually reached out to as many people as I could, it was like family, friends of parents, people I knew who had started their own company, cold email a few people, say like, I'd love to sort of talk to you for 15 minutes. And that's something I still do today. When I was trying to figure out whether I want to go HBS this year or next year, and when I was figuring if I wanted to continue at Plane Crazy or if I wanted to get some other experience, I would reach out to people, whatever connections I could find, reached out to a lot of people on LinkedIn cold, even if I didn't know them. People more often than not are willing to help, and I think honestly, like, all you really need to do is ask. There will be on LinkedIn, most people will ignore you or take very long to get back. But usually if you can find some distant connection, obviously a close connection, people are very often willing to help. Even cold emailing, cold messaging, people are very willing to help. I think it just need to be a little mindful of people's time. So even if you don't get a response for 3 weeks, it happens sometimes. But yeah, I think, anyone, who started a company, even just professors, lawyers, anyone who's seen people start companies, anyone who knows someone who started a company, just reach out to whoever you can, as many people as you can. And this is something I actually focus on or hold true for my life. But like, no matter what I'm doing or what I'm working on, I get the opinions of as many people as I can. Even if I've written an article, I'll send it out to a lot of people. And, people might tell me, oh, it's not great. People might give me feedback. Doesn't mean I take everyone's feedback. More often than not, I do, because these are people I really value and sort of, take their advice very seriously. But I think at the end of the day, you're the one making the decision. You're the one who's going to be responsible for the decision. You're the one who's going to be held, to account. So I think ask as many people as you can, talk to as many people as you can, reach out through alumni networks, reach out on LinkedIn, reach out through friends, reach out to parents. And then at the end of the day, see what everyone has told you and just go with your gut and see what makes the most sense from what everyone's sort of giving you advice on.
Point. We're going to move to a different sort of question, but I think a lot of people might be interested on this. How did you prepare for Harvard, and what aspects did you keep in mind when applying to an Ivy League university? What did you mention in an admission essay? I think the point that you said about the Harvard professor saying that there's no rush to attend and to start is an interesting one.
Yeah, that was actually very useful. Actually, I spoke to a bunch of students as well, and everyone was like, yeah, business school is going to be a great time, and you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to prepare you for a lot. But right now, you're 24 years old, you're 25 years old. Like, why are you in a rush to get started? Like, enjoy your time, learn as much as you can, especially HBS, case discussion, class participation focus. You want to be able to contribute. And the more experience you have, the more you can contribute. So I think in that sense, that was great advice. I think, how did I prepare for Harvard? Uh, Difficult question to answer because I actually didn't even know about the existence of this 2+2 program until my final year. When I applied, so when I was actually, funny story, but I decided that, okay, at some point, I love law, I love studying law, but I'm truly passionate about entrepreneurship and I do want to start my own company. So my plan was to work in corporate law, um, do VC or PE, law, hopefully transition, maybe do an MBA, and then maybe start my own company. I had these big life plan, and I was like, okay, 10 years, and I'll be able to do it. And I was talking to one of my friends from school, and he was like, "Oh, why don't you check out this 2+2 program?" And at that point, only HBS and Stanford were offering them these deferred enrollment programs. Right now, I was talking to someone day before yesterday who called me just to get some advice, and he said Kellogg's, which is another great business school, Northwestern, U Chicago, UPenn, MIT, a lot of universities, Wharton, I think even Stern, maybe a lot of universities are sort of offering these deferred programs. So there are a lot of options now. So at that time, I was only HBS and JSB, and I thought, I checked out the program and sounded pretty good. At that time, obviously, I mean, you never go into applying to any of these universities thinking you're going to get in. But obviously, at some level, I was like, okay, maybe I do have a chance. Um, and so I prepared for my GMAT. I think obviously GMAT was a big part of it to prove that even as a law student, I can do well in math. I can do well on that front. I think so. I think that was important. I think other than that, the essay, of course, is really important. Making sure your grades stay up. I think I don't want to take too much time on this question. I can talk about it for a long time, but in terms of the essay, just being truthful, show really bringing out your personality, and just your entire story and why you want to do like an MBA, why you want to work on a company. I mean, why you want to sort of go to HBS, why you want to go to GSB. So, when people ask me, oh, what did you write in your essay? What did you write on your resume? I was like, I didn't write anything that I didn't do. I didn't even know about this program. And it was not like I was in my first year, I came in saying, okay, I want to get into HBS 2+2. So I'm going to tick off a bunch of boxes. I actually didn't talk to any counselors who will tell you, you need this and you need that. It was more like, okay, this is who I truly am. This is what I've done. I've done, in every year of my law school life, I have done something related to entrepreneurship. I'm truly passionate about this. I know exactly who I am to some extent and what I want to do. So, and that's what I tried bringing out through the essay.
Yeah, I think you made a great point on this idea that, especially, universities in general, whether it's Ivy League or not, it's not just about you going in as a student and taking whatever information you can get. It is really about whether it's Ivy League, whatever it is, these universities really care that you also contribute, that you have something to say,
100%.
that you have something to talk about when you're in these classes. It's much more of an equal exchange. So I think, the work experience that you've created, the organizations you've created really plays a part in this.
Yeah, I think just whatever experience you have, right? Even if you haven't started something of your own, working at a big company, like the class I attended, I actually happened to attend a class on entrepreneurship, so entrepreneur's journey. And the way the class worked was they had a case study on a company and they actually had the founder, CEO of that company sitting there. And it was really funny because, the case study ends at a point where the company was on the verge of failure. And then, the entire class discussion was about what would you have done differently? How would you have made sure the company didn't get to this point? And everyone's just criticizing everything the company's done up until that point, and the founder's just sitting there listening. And obviously, that company happened to become very, very successful, extremely successful. It was more about just for the sake of class participation. But the more you've done in your life, the more you'll be able to contribute to something like in a class like this, right? If you've never started your own company, or if you've never even worked at a startup, you've never even worked at a normal company, you've never seen that full journey, what are you even going to say? So I think it's really important, and especially in an MBA, it's different in your undergrad because you're there more to learn. But I think MBA, any grad school, you're there to network, you're there to sort of learn from each other, you're there to contribute to each other. And yeah, like you're saying, right, it's very important, and that's something they place great emphasis on as well.
Okay, all right, last few minutes. We're going to take a step back, look at a little bit of a broader question from Yashvi. She says, "Hi, Mishaal. Thank you for wonderful insights. Um,
Thank you.
what is your opinion about the startup environment in India?" First question, is it a welcoming place or is it difficult to break into? We're going to end on this, your overall thoughts on the startup environment.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for tuning in. I think it's not necessarily a blanket answer. And the startup environment in India has really transformed in the last 7 years. I entered Jindal in 2013. Sounds crazy now that I think about 7 years. But it's after Facebook sort of took off, after Oyo, after Ola, after all these guys, after Amazon, Uber, everyone sort of like really came into India and solidified their position. I think obviously it's become a lot more accepting, and it's almost like great to say, oh, I have my own startup or I'm working in my own startup. So I think that transformation has definitely happened from where people would look down upon you if you had a startup towards, oh, he's an entrepreneur, sort of glorifying that. I think the startup environment in India, it's my experience at least so far has been pretty great. Even entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, everyone's been very, is usually very open, very welcoming, very happy to give advice. You're going to find, and obviously culture depends from city to city as well. I know companies in Bombay might have a lot more corporate culture. You talk to people in Bangalore and they have this very like work from home, very like, oh, wear what you want and come to office sort of culture. Companies in Bombay, more often than not like that. Right? You're like, Bombay is a more corporate place. You're like coming in, set times, no work from home. You have to be dressed properly. So I think culture may depend on office to office, but I think overall, I'd say startup environment in India is very welcoming. People are very willing to help. Companies usually are very willing to help. There's so many events, and I'm sure everyone's been seeing it right now during COVID because they've all been going online. Everything's a webinar. But like people are always happy to share their knowledge, happy to learn from each other. There's just a lot of resources out there. So I think overall, I'd say, definitely nothing difficult to break into. Finding the right company, finding the right role may take a little bit of time, but, at least the way I think about it, any startup experience you have is going to help you learn a lot, because more often than not, you're taking care of more than one thing. And secondly, just generally, right, you're seeing a company that's coming up from basically didn't even exist or might have just started out like 6-8 months ago to something that really is trying to become something big. So regardless of whether the company succeeds, company fails, culture is great, not great, you're going to learn a lot. But yeah, I mean, I truly love being an entrepreneur. I love working in startups. I would highly recommend it.
Do you think that the startup culture is going to change now post-COVID?
I think it depends from company. I think it depends from, sorry to interrupt, but I was just saying, I think it depends from company to company. Tech companies, yeah, I'm hearing a lot of my friends who work at tech startups saying, oh, they're encouraging work from home. I work at an e-commerce company, right? And you can't really pack orders from home. You can't do a lot of like, your customer relationship, the way our whole like customer care office is set up, the way our operations logistics is set up, the way our accounting team is set up. It's usually a lot easier if we're all in office together. So I think for my company, maybe not. I think for tech companies, yes, definitely. I think, this entire COVID situation has helped a lot of people realize that a lot of things that we thought couldn't be done from home can be done from home. And, another thing that's truly come to the limelight is a bit more, I wouldn't say a work-life balance at all. I think working from home has been a lot more difficult because now there's no timings whatsoever. But I think work-life balance, or just in the sense of being at home, spending more time with your family, I think people are realizing that that's really important. And, there are things I could be doing from home. I don't necessarily need to be in the office. So I think there will be a bit more of an emphasis on people who are able to work from home. They'll be like, okay, I'd rather sit at home today, be with my family. And I know now that I've been forced to do it, I know I can get it done from home. But I think, it's still, India is still a little bit away. Like, it's not exactly like Silicon Valley or exactly how you see it over there in the US. It's more still a corporate, like set culture. But again, very much depends on company to company, what the company is doing and so on.
What are your, and this is just a question I had, what are your thoughts on consumer brands through this and what's coming up? Because obviously when everyone's home, consuming has been reduced quite a bit. And I know a lot of
Yes.
entrepreneurs want to start consumer brands, you know, this
Yeah,
coffee.
no, definitely. FMCG is a huge, huge play in India. You know, we've done at Playing Crazy a lot of FMCG projects. At Dr. Vedia's, we sometimes look at ourselves as also as an FMCG company, because we are, I mean, making products and selling it, and sort of, you know, it's an e-commerce company, even if it's Ayurveda. I think for us, in the sense that Ayurveda, we've been a little lucky; it has been qualified as essential. You know, immunity boosting is a major part of Ayurveda, so people are sort of, we're seeing, okay, not the same sales we were seeing pre-lockdown, but we're getting up there, and we're pretty optimistic that post-lockdown there is going to be increased sort of spending in this healthcare category in Ayurveda generally for immunity boosting. I think generally for other FMCG products, you know, most companies should be okay. You know, at some point we're going to start going back to normal, and I think things that are going to be hit more than FMCG are luxury, fashion. You know, these are companies, I'm talking to friends who, you know, I have a close friend who works with one of India's biggest tech fashion companies. I have a friend who runs a shoe brand. These people are facing much more difficulty, because it's like, when people come out of this and they think about, okay, a lot of people have lost their job, a lot of people have faced pay cuts. It's like, what is it important to spend my money on? So, you know, consumer goods, like if you're buying food, if you're buying coffee, if you're buying, you know, staples, so to say, I mean, you might not need to buy like the most expensive coffee or the most expensive chips, but you're still going to buy it, right? And most big FMCG companies in India play at that price point, which is not very expensive. It's more of a mass focused brand. And I think those companies will be fine, and continue to thrive as long as they're able to sort of get over this period. I think a lot of companies are coming out with very innovative ways to get past this, you know, teaming up with other brands, you know, doing whatever they can to stay relevant at these times. I think luxury, you know, and we saw in China after lockdown lifted a huge rise in revenge buying. But I think that's not really going to hold true. I think, you know, the economies are down, salaries are down, companies are doing worse. So spending, you know, money on things that are not necessarily viewed as a necessity, um, is going to sort of take a bit of a hit. But, you know, again, these are all just my own views. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. But I'm excited to see how it goes.
Well, I feel like we could just keep on talking forever, but it is 11:55, so I am gonna have to round out. This has been such a pleasure. It's always great to connect with you, Mishaal. I think you always bring such wonderful insight, not only for JGU students, but also for, you know, everyone that is on the call that has something to learn from your experience and how you're learning, adapting, and consistently growing. So excited for everything that you have going forward, and please always stay connected with the JGU family. I think we're all
definitely was hoping to do this. Yeah, thank you so much. You know, really appreciate it. It was a pleasure doing this with you. You know, I think was hoping to do this in person, but maybe next time. But yeah, thank you so much for getting me to do this. It was a always great chatting with you. And, you know, just for everyone who's still watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Any questions, anyone who wants to reach out to me, Facebook, LinkedIn, you know, whatever works. I'll definitely share my newsletter with Ronita as well. She can share it with everyone. But thanks a lot, guys. It was great doing this, and feel free to reach out in case there were any questions I wasn't able to answer during the session.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For tuning in. See you, Mishaal.
Take care.
Take care.